This is March 21st, 2013, and Dr. Robert Phillip Upchurch is going to be filming the Sherwood Upchurch clan. 3, 2, 1.
Sherwood Upchurch was a member of the 5th generation of the family in America, and thus the head of a clan. We say he was head of Upchurch clan number 10. One of the very special things about Sherwood that I like is that his name was not John or William. So many in the family had that same name over and over again, and it began to be hard to sort them out. So it's a great pleasure to have a person named Sherwood. He's the only one in the countryside that has that Upchurch name. So we start with him, and of course the first thing I do is start with his bio file, where all the information is recorded about him. And in preparing for this particular little presentation, I came across something that was very surprising and informative, and I'll get to that in a moment. In addition, I always look at the master outline, and here's the one that includes all the data for Sherwood Upchurch and his descendants. Now, as with many Upchurches, in the early years, we start with him in Brunswick County, Virginia. And we have to tell the story there. So first, let's look at the 5-generation chart to see how he fits into the family. And here you see the chart starting with Michael Upchurch I, going through his son Richard I to James Upchurch I, and finally in the 4th generation to Michael Upchurch III, who's head of the Brunswick branch of the family in America. And you see there, you see his 4 children, one of whom is Sherwood Upchurch, the individual who is the topic of today's little presentation. He then, being a member of the 5th generation and being one of 22 such individuals who headed clans. He had thousands of descendants, so I hope there'll be some of those watching this presentation and learning more about their ancestor, Sherwood Upchurch. Now, as I mentioned, his life started out in Virginia. So let's look at the Virginia map. And we start with seeing that Surry County is highlighted in yellow, as that's where the Upchurch family started in America. But over the years, they drifted south and west, and there you see Brunswick County highlighted. And it was there that we find the Sherwood Upchurch being born about 1771. Now, Sherwood was comfortable there as his father, Michael Upchurch III, had been born and lived his entire life in that county, and as a matter of fact, his grandfather, James Upchurch I, moved there in his adult years and finally died in Brunswick County. So here's another set of facts relating to our Upchurch family in Brunswick County, Virginia. We find there evidence of Sherwood Upchurch because he was shown on the tax list in Brunswick County, Virginia in 1786 and 1787. But he did not marry in Brunswick County. Many of his cousins Upchurch cousins had married there, but not so with Sherwood Upchurch. He moved as a young man to Rutherford County, North Carolina, and we should take a brief look at that map and what it tells us. And here you see the place where he relocated, and we know he was there as early as the 26th of January, 1790, as he was a bondsman for someone in that county, probably still a single young man. Now, the thing that was exciting to me as I looked at this is that I have previously reported that in America, when the 1790 census was taken, there were 11 heads of households under the name Upchurch. And I've talked about those, and at the same time I lamented that Sherwood Upchurch was not among those listed. And I could never understand that because I knew he was present in 1790 in North Carolina, so why wasn't he there? And now I have the secret because I looked one more time at the census record, and I find here that if you call up the Upchurches on the 1790 census, it will only show 11 heads of households. So why isn't Sherwood there? The reason he is not there is they spelled his name Upkirch, Upchurch. And of course, Kirch is the German word for church. My guess is that you had someone with a German background that was listening to him pronounce his name, and he wrote it in the German fashion. And that's the way it is in the record. So now we have a 12th family in North Carolina on the 1790 census, and it's Sherwood Upchurch, please, not Upchurch. There was another little peculiarity, because if you look in the census records, it shows that he was in Lincoln County. But if you look at the actual records, it turns out that Lincoln County was the county that had its last listing on that same page. And the next page where he is actually listed is Rutherford County. This just gives you an illustration that we have to be very careful as we look at the records to see what they actually tell us about our family. And I think we will forever be straightening out these records. Well, what do we learn about Sherwood? The fact is that in Rutherford County, he married on the 21st of October, 1790, to Elizabeth Tomlinson. Now here, I have the last name of his wife spelled Tomberlinson. That's the long version. You will find in the records many other versions of that. Sometimes it's just Tomlin, Toblin, or any of the other possible versions you can imagine. I think it will take more research for us to be comfortable with settling on a particular name, spelling of that name. Well, so we're delighted to have now a member of our family in Rutherford County, North Carolina on the 1790 census. As best we can figure out, he and his wife had 6 children, one of whom some of them married there. But what happened is after the 6 children were born, his wife Elizabeth died. She died sometimes prior to 1804, because on the 2nd of January, 1804, we find him marrying a widow, Mary Smith Pell. Her husband, William Pell, had died. They had only married in 1795, so they had a very short married life. As best we can figure out, they may have had at least one child named William, after his father, born in 1797. Well, we then find Sherwood Upchurch in Rutherford County for decades to come. He was there on the 1810 census, the 1820, the 1830, and the 1840. He should have been there on the 1800, but for some reason we have not been able to find him there, although he was there in 1790. Well, we found other tracts of Sherwood Upchurch in Rutherford County. In 1802, he made a land grant application asking for 75 acres to be allocated to him, and it was so given. And it turns out that this was next to a tract of property he already owned, which he had acquired in 1798 by purchase. I think that probably was from his father-in-law, and it was a 50-acre tract. So now he has a total of 125 acres. Sherwood, although he had lived this large part of his adult life in Rutherford County, the fact is he moved to Georgia as an old man, and we find him there on the 1850 census in the home of his daughter Elizabeth, who had married a John Tomlin. I can't help but notice the similarity between her husband's name Tomlin, Tomlin, and Sherwood's wife Tomberlinson. I suspect if we do more research, we'll find out they came from the same family. In other words, the father and the daughter both married into a closely related family. So we find both Sherwood and his wife, second wife, living there in Campbell County, Georgia. Now, I don't think Campbell County exists today, but it in fact it originally was just south and west of what we know as Atlanta today, and I think Campbell County was absorbed into Fulton County, which is the county where we see Atlanta located. We also had on that Campbell County or Georgia census in 1850, in the same household, probably a grandson of by the name of Joseph Upchurch, and nearby we had a James Upchurch who was probably also a grandson. So we have more research to do. Now fortunately, these Upchurches came late enough in Georgia that they do not confuse the issue of several other branches of the family that got to Georgia starting as early as 1820. But still, by the time of 1850, 1860, 1870, you had several clans of Upchurches represented in Georgia, and that continues to give us a great challenge, although we're making progress in sorting those out. Well, let's go back to Rutherford County and see what else we can report there. One of the things that's very interesting to me is that there are some hints of more material we have to learn. For example, in 1804, there was a Joseph Upchurch who married Patsy Bradley. In 1804 in Rutherford County, there was a James Upchurch that married Nancy Bradley. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that Sherwood shows up there along about 1800, two other Upchurch males show up there about 1800, and these two other Upchurches marry Bradley's sisters. I think this gives her a broader picture, but we don't know how to put that all into place. The Sherwood part we understand, and we are reasonably well convinced that this Joseph Upchurch is the same Joseph Upchurch we have been researching for many years and for whom we have about 2,000 descendants organized. We don't know his father, but I think the fact that they're living in close proximity as early as 1800 gives us a hint that we should look closer at how these people might be related. Well, there's also the question of what kind of ongoing footprints do we find in Rutherford County, North Carolina, for this Upchurch family. Since Sherwood bugged out and went to Georgia, and two of his grandchildren certainly went with him, who was left behind? Well, it came as a great pleasure to me to come by this little book called Descendants of Logan Porter and Quintine Upchurch. And this was a book about Upchurches in Rutherford County, North Carolina. I obtained this book in 1996 and studied it with much interest, and was able to learn over time that it does tie into Sherwood Upchurch. And here's what I've written in the front of this. Now bear in mind, this all goes into the Upchurch collection, and at some point, if someone wants to study this family much more thoroughly, this valuable little book will be there, and they probably would be extremely difficult to find a copy of this book any place in America other than in the Upchurch collection. So here's what I figured out. We start with Sherwood Upchurch, who had a son, Adam Upchurch, who was raised in Rutherford County, North Carolina, and he had a son, Daniel Upchurch, born in 1839 in Rutherford County, who went off to the Civil War and certainly was captured and was imprisoned at Point Lookout in Maryland. And he had a daughter, Quintine Lulu Upchurch, born in 1869, and she is the Quintine Upchurch about whom this book is written. And it was written by one of her descendants. It's an interesting what she says in the back about this book, and this is a story that we could say to anyone when they start questioning our research. The writer, who's Laurie Rhodes Hensley, who says, I cannot apologize for any incompletions in this book because I worked very hard to reach everyone. Thanks to all that went out of the way to give me information on the families. Thanks to the biggest supporters. I hope all who read this book will enjoy it and share it with many generations to come. And that's precisely what we are doing. So here we have a long list of people who were in Rutherford County, North Carolina, and are the descendants of Sherwood Upchurch. So as we tell the story about Sherwood, just as we would tell it about any of the other heads of clans, we found the tentacles that reach out in many directions. Certainly the tentacles for Sherwood reached on into Georgia, but here's a tentacle that remained in Rutherford County, North Carolina, and we have the hard evidence of this particular tentacle here. I'm in the process of incorporating a certain amount of this material into the Sherwood Upchurch master outline. We think this has been a wonderful development to outline Sherwood Upchurch and how he fits into the family, and I hope people have enjoyed learning about Sherwood.